So I'm going to actually kick things off and I know many of the folks in the audience kind of know your stories and know what your company is about, but in the event that they're not really as familiar with them as what we are. Carolyn, why don't we start with you? A little bit about the organization, your business, all of that.
Wonderful. I run Circular Board, which is a virtual accelerator for women entrepreneurs. We serve high-growth women entrepreneurs from around the world, and we utilize technology to connect them to mentorship, sources of capital, media, and other resources to help grow their businesses.
Okay. Rob?
So Pivotal was founded many years ago. I co-founded Pivotal, and we have a mission statement of transforming the way the world builds software. And for many, many years, we did that with startups by helping them build software better and adopt new technologies and get to market faster. And in recent years, we're actually working more with large enterprises and bringing everything that we learned from those many, many years and working with hundreds of startups to larger enterprises, helping them rediscover software development, rediscover entrepreneurship in a way as they rediscover software development, and essentially help them compete with all of you disruptors. So that's what we're doing now.
And by the way, Rob, I'm super excited because as the Dell EMC deal closes here over the course of the next month or so, Pivotal will join the Dell family of products. And I told him and told the rest of the Dell team, I think it is the coolest part of what will enter and be part of the Dell family. So we're super excited about that. Keith?
So with DocuSign, and DocuSign's emerged kind of as the global standard of this new category, digital transaction management, that empowers anyone to transact anything, anytime, anywhere, on any device. And I want to thank Rob, John, Karen for being customers. I was talking with Carolyn. We're going to DocuSign enable Circular. And by the way, I just want to do a check. Show me a raise of hands, somebody who hasn't used DocuSign before. Has not. Raise them. Okay. I have my chief of staff over here. He's going to be getting all your names. So we're putting on about 85,000 unique users a day, and we've got about 85 million worldwide.
Fantastic. John?
And I'm John. I'm one of the co-founders of Stripe. Stripe is a platform for building an online business, and so we started out with payments, making it very easy to accept money from people all around the world for your app or your website. But since then, it's become a lot more in helping developers really run an online business. And so our latest product actually that we launched in February is Stripe Atlas, which helps people with incorporation and banking services. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to start my line of questions, Keith, with you and John. You certainly are great examples of fast-growing companies. You have a strong entrepreneurial kind of roots. Share with the audience what have you learned along that growth stage? What kind of advice could you leave the audience with?
Sure. I think three things. And before DocuSign, I was with a company called Ariba, which today is our 17th anniversary of going public, and now $1 trillion worth of commerce goes through the Ariba network on an annual basis, more than Amazon, eBay, and Alibaba combined. But I think the opportunity at DocuSign is much bigger in terms of the DocuSign Global Trust Network. And I look back on those two particular experiences, really three things. The first one is it's all about building a high-performance team. The company with the best people wins, and getting them to work together as a team is the multiplier and setting that clear direction. I think the second thing is the focus always has to be on the customer. At DocuSign, we always say we measure our success by our customer success, and that's why we have a thing that we call our one key metric that everybody in the company is compensated on, from the secretary, receptionist, on up, and that is on adoption for our customers, because that's the number one driver of their ROI. And last year we did about as many successful transactions we've done life to date over the last 12 years of the company. And then the third thing is, if you reach a level of success, there's tremendous wealth creation. in the company. And that can be, it's a kind of a short-term thing. I think it's all about building a noble cause in terms of impacting the world, whether it's a big difference, a little difference, but most of all, a meaningful difference. And that's how we look at DocuSign in terms of transforming the way companies do business and transforming the way people live their lives. I mean, we simplify people's lives securely.
That's great. You know, and there's not a lot of kind of fast-growing entrepreneurs that kind of reach that area of purpose so easy, so much earlier in their kind of evolution. And I think DocuSign has really figured that out. I think that's great. John, how about you?
Yeah, in the past few years, Stripe's been fortunate to experience a lot of growth. We now service, to give you a sense of scale, over 100,000 businesses who are all building their entire business on Stripe. I would say maybe two things. One is it's very important that you pick the right market and a growing market, in that if you want to build a high growth and a high performance business, it's going to be very hard to do that if you pick a business with all sorts of headwinds working against it. And if you actually look at a lot of successful companies, you can frame some of their success. Obviously, they executed tremendously well, they had good product market fit, but also a lot of the really successful companies had phenomenal timing. I mean, Dell, right, with the emergence of the personal computer and online ordering and direct to consumer. I mean, those were two trends and market growth that then Michael Dell and all the team were able to capture. If you look at something like Snapchat, it seems like a trivial example, but they're actually part of a larger shift towards the bandwidth being there to consume video on mobile. And so I think you'll notice the most successful companies are at the intersection of really stellar execution, and I would echo some of the things you said on building a high-performance team to enable that, but also having picked, and people can question whether it's luck or deliberate, but having picked a really good market to enter at a really good time. That's one. The second thing is, as you are experiencing fast growth and building and designing for growth, it's very important that you pick the right metrics and are disciplined with yourself in optimizing for those metrics. But one of the tricky things is picking the right metric to actually optimize for. And there's really an art in that. And I think, for example, in the earliest stages of a company's life, a lot of the founders almost without realizing it are optimizing for the maximum customer happiness. It doesn't matter yet quite how many customers you're serving, so long as those customers are really, really happy, and then you can scale that across. Then people go through this stage of optimizing for market share. And so, Facebook had all these doubters all during its growth that, that company will never make any money. If you look at it now, they're making, a very large amount of money. They're a very successful business. But during that stage, when they had all the doubters, it's because they were optimizing for market share and engagement and user growth and not revenue. So they had picked their metric and they were executing with extreme discipline on it, and they just weren't optimizing for revenue at that stage. And so I think you have to be really diligent on the metrics you're optimizing for, but you got to be careful which metric you've picked, lest it lead you astray.
Great insights, great insights. I love the thought around, and I'm always amazed by this whenever you talk to a fast-growing entrepreneur. They find this unmet need. Call it luck, call it timing. I think it's skillful, frankly. And they figure out how to serve that unmet need. Carolyn and Rob, talk a little bit about that with organizations and the firms that you run. Because Carolyn, you've certainly met an unmet need. Pivotal has certainly met an unmet need, especially with some of these larger companies now. Talk a little bit about kind of that journey that you were on and how you did that.
Certainly. So Circular Board started really as the answer to the thing that I wish I'd had when I started my first company. And I recognized, much later in the game that there were so many startup resources out there that I had no clue even existed. And this was 10 years ago, so it was a much different environment than it is today. But even today, women particularly are not plugged into the resources that exist. And that was really the genesis of this idea, what if women could get plugged into these networks and understand what's available? What would that do for their companies, and how would that help them scale? And so I recognized the need, but there was still a whole lot that I didn't know. And so I spent 2 years really understanding what the problem was and looking at existing accelerators and existing resources that were out there and trying to figure out why weren't women participating at the same rates, and for the ones that were, what was their experience in these systems and processes, and what was it like for them. And so when we had a really strong understanding of what the problem was, we were much better able to map out the solution. And I think that's the thing that a lot of entrepreneurs, even though they think they get the problem and they have that experience, really spending the time to dig into every single aspect of what that problem is, it makes building a scalable solution so much easier.
Rob, how about you?
Yeah, there's definitely an unmet need at a very sort of broad level in terms of software development. The modern Pivotal really originated in the 90s in the birth of an agile software development movement, which is software development that's optimized for rapid change. And before that time, most software development was done with an assumption that you needed to prevent change, or at least control it and keep it as early in development process as you possibly can. And these days, even in the world of startups, it's probably hard to remember that because people are trying to do an MVP, right? They're pivoting, they're getting things deployed continuously. So it's a very different world today. In the early 2000s, though, a lot of the startups really didn't have any of that kind of discipline to approach a rapidly changing environment, rapidly changing software requirements in a market. But that's the thing that software startups need, or any startup needs that utilizes software, which is pretty much at the moment any startup. But in those days, if we tried to talk to larger enterprises and say, hey, you need to change continuously and adopt agile methods and do all these things, we'd be debating it for weeks. Right? Startups just wanted to do it. So we served startups for many years. Now, part of what's happened with software is eating the world, or as I like to say, software is remaking the world, and all of these disruptors are emerging to challenge established industries. And it doesn't matter what vertical you're in, automotive or insurance or industrial, they're all being disrupted, generally by startup companies, whether they're venture-backed startups, whether they're the well-known internet companies. They are disrupting traditional industries. So now when we talk to the largest companies in the world, whether it's Ford or GE or Allstate or Home Depot, there's no debate. They say, okay, we have to respond to all of this disruption, and we'd really love to become disruptors ourselves. And that's what they would really love. It may seem like far off in the distance. How do we go about doing that? And that's what, at the moment we're doing at Pivotal, and it's really the right time for it, is bringing them to two things that startups and pure software companies and internet companies assume. And that's an approach that optimizes for change and a technology that empowers the developer, right? Modern cloud technology. Larger enterprises don't have those two assumptions. They don't operate in an environment where you can assume those things. Continuous change, like software that evolves and is continuously deployed all day, that sounds very, very scary. They're still trying to limit change, right? And having cloud technology that's under the control of the developer, you can push your own applications to production. If you need to scale something, you don't need to file a ticket with an IT group and wait several months to get a new server, right? That'd be insane. If I'm sure at Stripe you don't worry about that, or at DocuSign you don't have to wait several months to get some new capacity. But at large enterprises, that's the norm, right? So that's what we're bringing to these companies now, is saying, okay, if you want to transform, if you want to rediscover software development, and not just avoid being disrupted, but potentially become disruptors again yourselves, here's how you become a modern software company. And it's a combination of approach and technology.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think you started, as you said, with how does your capability help kind of small businesses, and now you're kind of re-engineering and saying, you know what, now I can help the Fords, the GEs, the Dells, other companies take what you've learned and help with that customer segment and scale it to some of the larger companies.
Exactly.
How about mistakes? Everyone wants to talk about, about all the happy times, and being an entrepreneur is not all about happy times, and you've made mistakes along the way. What's one of the biggest lessons that you learned? You didn't make any mistakes, John?
I'm still in the process of making Oh man, where do you begin? I think a good framework that organizations can have for mistakes is whether they're reversible or not. And organizations can then incorrect behavior can be on either side of that decision. On the reversible decisions, I think good cultures have a healthy culture of experimentation, and one of the mistakes companies can make is being far too timid when it comes to reversible decisions, when in fact you should just let people within the company really go and experiment, bring data to bear on this question, and come back with results. And I think that the companies that have built very high-performing cultures are ones that have a lot of experimentation and make reversible decisions effectively. And then there's the other side of it, which is irreversible decisions, very large decisions that you can't necessarily undo easily. And luckily, I think there's some availability bias here in that you're talking to companies that presumably did not make any
fatal mistakes,
company-ending irreversible mistakes. And so, maybe we should do a separate panel with people who have very significant regrets. But I think the very large mistakes that people can make tend to be around market strategy or launches, or deciding 2 years later that was the wrong product to invest in, or hiring mistakes which aren't irreversible but are certainly expensive to reverse. The problem with these mistakes, and why I say I'm probably in the position of making a few of them right now, is we live in a very complicated, over-constrained, multifaceted space, and so it's often only in hindsight, and often with only 2 or 3 years of hindsight, that you can go back and definitively grade your work. And if people knew they were making that mistake in the moment, they wouldn't be here.
Yep. Keith, how about you?
Well, I think a classic one, and I made this mistake early on 30 years ago when I came out from Detroit to Silicon Valley from General Motors out here, and that is not focusing on the long term, focusing on the short term, and also not thinking about it's the size of the pie that matters, not the slice. So, so many times you see companies, okay, it's, as Michael, we talk about it, the 90-day shot clock. You got to make, and you get the gas break. It's really important to focus on the long term and your strategic just moves. We have 7 strategic, and don't deviate from that. The other interesting one to see is like, guys who start companies like, man, I own 60% of the company, and the great thing starts in, and you can see it with venture capitalists too, by the way. And to understand, it's about the size of the pie. So, for example, at DocuSign, I think we really rewrote the playbook in terms of strategically using our equity financing strategy with our partnership strategy. It's like, that's why Dell's an investor, Intel, Microsoft, SAP, Salesforce, Google, NTT, Samsung, Telstra, Deutsche Telekom, FedEx. And they all have ownership in the success of DocuSign.
We weren't offered an investment.
Well, it's never too late. How much you got? A lot at Stripe.
You can talk afterwards after Keith lands all those customers that put their hand up and said they haven't used DocuSign. Rob, how about you? Mistakes you've made?
Yeah, one comes to mind. It wasn't too long ago, and it's one that it'd be obvious that I shouldn't have made once I tell you what it is. So, one of the things about doing software development in this different way, the way that Pivotal helps clients develop software, is that it's really based on, like I said, continuous change. But to get that, you need continuous feedback. So feedback loops are based in the development process everywhere, between people, between machines and people, within the machines. There's feedback being gathered continuously and evaluated and acted upon, and then things are evolving based on all that feedback, right? So, so it's throughout our process. And one of the things that I counsel entrepreneurs and founders who have adopted these techniques is to, really, you've got to really support your teams, because it requires a lot of discipline to do this. And if an executive comes into the team and says, I know you guys love writing all those automated tests, and you do it first. You write your tests and then you write your code, and this really keeps the code totally covered by tests, and it makes sure that you can deploy continuously, and that's really great. But we got this deadline coming up in about a week, and maybe you could just wait until after that deadline to write the test, because you could go faster and you could get more in, and then I swear I'll give you extra time afterwards to write the test. And what happens is you're demoralizing developers and they sort of, then all of that discipline that they've got to carry things forward starts falling apart. So one of the things that happened at Pivotal that was interesting is that despite all of these feedback loops and all of this discipline that we've got, there was a glaring error, which is that, a glaring gap, I should say. The way that we evaluated people was still rather traditional, like sort of a annual or annual review, and the manager would go out and gather feedback on people, long after the fact with other people who'd worked with them, and then would evaluate them on that basis. And so there were some teams that said, this doesn't sound like Pivotal. We should be, we pair program, so we should be evaluating each other every day with whoever you just worked with. Maybe we should just kind of tweet a little bit of feedback, right? And we could just build a system to do that. That's easy. And so they did, sort of a skunkworks thing on the side. And they built a system, and they decided to pilot it with a few teams. And then I found out about it. And for some reason, I got really angry, probably just because they didn't tell me, right? And I said, that's going to be fluff, right? It's just going to be like, hey, great test you wrote today, or, it was really nice pairing with you, or something like that. I thought it would just be fluff.
I am the CEO. I need to be involved, right?
I did, yeah. Like, well, how come you guys didn't tell me? This is never going to work. This is the stupidest idea I've heard. I was really upset. And they said, well, can we continue with the experiment? And I'm like, okay, it's going to fail, but you can do it. So you see where this is going, right? Of course.
It's kind of like parenting, right? Your kids come to these ideas, and you go, hey, I'm experienced. I know, right?
No, exactly. I mean, and it echoes in my mind every time I tell my kids something. And of course, it turned out that it was fantastic. And the resulting body of feedback on someone after a few months, you could just even skim through it, and you could see these themes emerge, and you really got this sense of immediacy and valuable feedback. It was something phenomenal. We rolled it out to most of the company at this point. And so I sent an email and I apologized, copied everybody that had been involved in it, and I said, boy, you would have thought that I could, see that from the beginning, because it was really an embodiment of exactly who we were and what we were about. And I didn't see it. And I think the lesson learned from that mistake is it's very easy, you can establish a culture and you can establish process. And as an entrepreneur and as the person who's leading your company, it's still really easy to make that kind of mistake in the fundamentals about who you are. And so you shouldn't think, well, that couldn't happen to me. It's just one of the easiest things to do.
Great story.
Yeah.
Great story. Carolyn, how about you? What mistakes have you made or seen?
Yeah, I think both myself, and I see it with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with, but underestimating the complexity of what you're trying to tackle. I think we're starting to reach for the bigger problems and trying to solve these greater issues, and it requires a lot of collaboration. And I rarely see a startup today that doesn't require bringing in partners. We have had great support from Dell. I spent yesterday at Pivotal's office. We use Stripe. Now I'm a
DocuSign
as well. So, but it requires bringing in a lot of people to make anything happen, and a lot of companies and organizations. And so, reaching out. I mean, what I have learned is that it's really important to reach out very early on, and to reach out often and engage as many people as you can in what you're doing, because I think it does a couple of things. It tells you, if you aren't getting the traction and you aren't making headway when you're reaching out, you probably aren't on the right path. There's probably something wrong with what you're trying to do. And then it also helps you move further and faster. So that's, I think the biggest thing is just getting out there and putting it. I hear so often entrepreneurs saying, I'm just waiting for this to happen before I can do this. And that waiting game is a death sentence for any startup. So it's just important to put it out there quickly.
Great insight. And I know, Dell, we've worked with a number of partners, and we learn as much from you all as the benefit that you get from working with us. And there's a real kind of give and take on both sides. Do you all have a business strategy? Do you have a business plan? This question actually came up yesterday in one of the earlier sessions. Is it a year? Is it 3 years? I mean, how far out do you think and plan? And, Keith, how about you?
Yeah, we call it our leverage growth strategy. And we can represent it on one PowerPoint slide. Now there's about 18 builds on it. It's actually the same one we used at Ariba, where on the x-axis we look at building barriers to entry, and on the y-axis it is leverage in the business model in terms of profitability. And it starts off with exactly what you said. You find that need, you create the category. And by the way, you create that category, you name it, and if you name it, you're the only one there. If you're the only one there, you're the leader, right? Then you build the platform. And then, the next step is, okay, so you go after the business, B2B side, or the consumers? I believe in the golden rule, the guy with the golden rules, so B2B side. And then you leverage it, you go to the consumer side. Then you turbocharge it with partners like Dell, who resells DocuSign around the world, SAP resells around. So you turbocharge it. And then you set a standard. For us at DocuSign, XDTM standard, it's like PCI standard is in payments, the XDTM standard is in terms of digital transactions. And then the last step is the network effect. And that's where you get the big multiple. And I was talking about keep that long-term focus. Those sequential steps are important, that everybody in the company can articulate what that strategy is. You can articulate it to the financial community. They understand it. Everybody understands it. And the most complicated exercise, or the most intellectual exercise, is taking something complicated and making it simple. So you can execute on it.
Yeah, I agree.
The thing I would add to that is I fully believe in the value of business strategy for established businesses like ourselves. And I think there's you can look at the history of businesses that underweighted the strategy and just aren't around anymore. That said, while it's very important for established businesses, and we now do it on a 5 to 10 year time horizon, looking at where we want to be and where we want the product to get to, and how that'll be reflected in the business and things like that, I think it's much more acceptable for early stage businesses and startups just getting off the ground and finding product market fit to not have that answered yet. In that, I think you can induct your way into a strategy. I mean, maybe you disagree, but certainly in Stripe's case, I know we didn't have some grand strategy when we were setting out. We didn't have a business plan. Stripe came from the fact that Patrick and I had very direct experience with payments, and everything was terrible. And so, our strategy basically boiled down to, this seems really bad. We can't find any products in the market that we would actually want to use, let's go make one. And our market sizing was, well, we would use it, and I've talked to one or two friends who would, and that was about the extent of our strategy.
Yeah.
Now, as time has gone on, that product got initial adoption, proved popular, and we expanded it. Then you start layering in the strategy. Yeah. But I think some people think that you have to have this 10-year business plan on day one of starting the company. And honestly, I think, just like no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy, you can have all the business plans you want, and then you bring it out in the market and you're like, oh, turns out nobody wants that product at all. And so it's much better to start tactical, start with getting a product that people actually like and engage with, and then start building the strategy on top of that.
The thing I like about your point is you're challenging the status quo. You're finding something that you don't like, using paper, or the existing payment.
I mean,
that's key.
Starting a company will generally involve some kind of contrarianism as well, in that starting a company is a statement that the world works inefficiently right now. There should be a service or a product or a company that does X. And so you're basically saying the world is wrong in some way, and you're going to fix it. And I think then, once you have proven that that is actually a reasonable statement, then you can start building the business defensibility strategy and the turbocharging things and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
I would add to that too, though. I think there's a stage in early growth where there isn't a lot of substance to your company. And so you have to hold on to that long-term vision, because that's what you're selling on. If you walk into a meeting with that first investor or trying to get that first big client and you don't really have anything to sell, you've got to have that long-term plan in place, because that's the sales tool. So for us, I mean, we definitely have the short-term kind of sprint plan, but we always hold on to the long term. So I don't know that there's sort of a 1, 3, 5, 10-year plan, but there's definitely the very long term, and then the here's what we're working on this week plan.
So I'm going to open it up to questions in the audience here. And okay, I was going to ask one more question, but you know what? Since there's some questions already, why don't you ask away?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for a great panel. My name is Greta Shetler, and I represent an organization called We Connect International. So we connect women entrepreneurs to global value chains. And one of the biggest challenges that you all mentioned actually was having that high-performance team to get to that next level. So what we experience is that we usually find the women-owned businesses that are growth-oriented, but they're already established. And a lot of times they don't have those high-performance teams. So how do you go about, if you have a team that is not that level, to then going about making those changes on tight budgets in order to be able to then readjust and realign and get to that growth trajectory?
Anybody?
Maybe just to take a shot at it. I think when it comes to building high-performance teams, and here again, I don't want to make things too complicated, there's really 3 ingredients. The company with the best people wins. So, as a leader, you got to spend a third of your time out there recruiting. The second thing, get everybody working together as a team, give a common focus, like perhaps the customer. And then the third thing is set a crystal clear direction. And that involves, we affectionately call playbook. The vision, what is that long-term vision, noble cause? Your mission, your values, team rules, how do those values get personified in everyday language? And then, your long-term objectives that don't change. And then your strategy, right? I gave an example of this. All boiled down to execution. And I think those are kind of the 3 ingredients, because people really need that clear direction, but it also comes down to the top team and getting them performing. And it seems simple, but it's a hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. But if you achieve it, it's magic, no matter what industry you're in.
So Keith, during your journey and your experiences at Ariba and at DocuSign, did you find times during there where you just said, it's not the leadership team that's going to be able to take this company to the next level? And is it something that was kind of one of those aha moments and you had to kind of clean house, or did you just say, you know what, I need a new leader here, a new leader there? I mean, what was your experiences like?
Well, one thing that I always do is I'm always looking for the next impact player. And a lot of the time, it's the exec team, because just because somebody's good at an early inventing stage doesn't mean they'll be good at high growth, public boom. So, and by the way, if there's nobody on the executive team to upgrade, then I go look for an impact player 1 level below, or an impact developer. So always doing that. There have been times where it's kind of like, all right, 4 C-level guys, kaboom, right? You have to do those kind of things. And interesting thing, this was an interesting thing at Ariba. We started with 7 founders. Most of them I kind of worked with before. One I had, a guy named Paul Haggard. He's a professor right here, the best object-oriented programmer back in the Valley in the 90s. He worked for Jobs as VP of Engineering. And so this was like employee number 9. And he comes into my office after 2 weeks. He goes, Croc, I don't think he's going to make it. I go, man, he's only been here 2 weeks, Paul. What do you mean? He goes, nah, he's a B. We can't have a B player. And I go, well, can't you put him in the systems integration or something? Or give him a test. He goes, all right, I'll give him a test. And I'll give him 2 weeks. So he comes walking in my office a week later, and he goes, I got some good news. I got some bad news. Well, he was a B+. He wasn't a B. But I fired him. He goes, you see, because B's attract C's and A's attract A+. Yeah. And that was the beginning of the culture. That's the most important aspect. And to set that right out of the gate is critical. It's absolutely critical.
Great insights. What other questions?
Hi, my name is Roy Okupi, and I'm CEO of a company called Unique Studios. So what we do is comic books and animation about superheroes, but not just any superheroes based in Africa. I was originally born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria, and I always wanted to see superheroes from where I was from. So I decided when I got the chance, I was going to do something about it. First of all, I wanted to thank you for this panel. I use my Dell to edit all my videos. I use Stripe to take payments from my website. I use DocuSign for my contracts for my artists, so I feel connected to everyone.
I have 4.5-year-old twins. Send me your stuff, baby.
Well, my question is, we're starting to get a lot of attention because obviously we're doing something that's not really out there right now. So the book has been featured on CNN, Forbes, BBC, New York Times. And just like you said, we're trying to turbocharge now, with everything. So we're trying to get an animated movie out there, so we're looking for investors. My question is, how do you, what's your advice on selecting people that you want to work with? It could be a partner or an investor, or would you just say, if anybody has the money, just take the money and run with it, basically?
Rob, how about you? Do you want to take that one in terms of how you think about investors and?
Sure. I mean, not so much for Pivotal itself, but having worked with so many startups, and most of the startups that we worked with over the years, among the hundreds of startups, were actually brought to us by the venture community. They would bring their portfolio companies to us, and we'd help them really get going, help them build their team, get something launched, and then they'd be on their way. And I think, when you look at those investors, you want to find the ones that can actually help you build your team. To your point, Keith, building that team, building the right team, is something really critical. And some investors are really, really good at helping you do that. They have big networks, and they're willing to put in the time to go out and talk to people and bring them to you to help you build your team. And some are just money. And I think if you're just getting money out of an investor, that's really not the reason that you want them. You want help building the team.
Any other thoughts from any other panelists around how you think about investors? Carolyn, you had an interesting,
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends sometimes too. It sounds like you have a lot of traction with what you're doing and you have some options. There are some companies out there that, depending on the situation of their company, might not have as many options, and they might need that money to get to the next level where they actually have options. So I think it's great, and we talk a lot about always wanting the investors that bring so much to the table, and that's ideal. But it really depends on the market you're in and the timing and the stage of growth that you're in. So that first check sometimes is really often just a validator, and sometimes it's worth taking to get the other money that will be very beneficial. So don't necessarily just walk away from it just because you think there's something better out there. It's a little bit of a gamble, I think, in choosing your investor circle, and so you have to kind of play that risk a little bit.
There is a trade-off, right, between valuation and who you pick, because sometimes somebody won't offer you as much as the big money guys, and I think that who that investor or that person who's going to sit on your board, that's key, and I think to make sure that they're of the highest integrity, that cannot be underestimated. Also that they're fun to be around, or you get along with them personally, because there are going to be ups and downs. And if you don't like that person, even though they're the big money guy, man, your life's going to be a nightmare for sure. So I think it's the quality, if you can. I mean, I agree in a lot of cases. You may not have a choice, especially early on, but you can do the trade-off in terms of valuation. And I'll tell you, I'd take the quality of the people over that value. And here again, it gets down to, it's not about the size of your slice and all that kind of stuff.
And you always hear those horror stories about investors turning on founders, and so I think that's the big thing, is being aware that you're inviting these people into your family because you're working with them for a long time, and so that is really important.
What other questions?
Hi there.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
My name is Teodos Wondamu. I'm from Ethiopia. My question is for Rob. My company specifically works on mapping and navigation. I use your software almost every day with my team. I love your product. My teammates don't, because I get to track what they're doing. So my question is, when it first started, agile development methodologies were not very common. How did you know to stay on working in that particular area? And
Yeah, I think it was actually very, very easy at the time. because I think that I and my co-founders and co-workers at the time, Pivotal was very small when we were sort of in the middle of that agile revolution and working with the early pioneers there. But I had always had a very, very pragmatic orientation towards doing software development, and I'd found that software development as it was traditionally practiced was not pragmatic at all. And so when these agile methods were sort of being put together, it really felt like, okay, this is how it's done, this makes sense. It really clicked for me, and I actually just didn't want to develop software another way. So I couldn't have quit doing it that way if I'd tried. I think the really interesting turning point on that was something that was a little bit unusual for us, in that, for a lot of people in that community, everyone wanted to evangelize and go out and say, wow, everyone else, look at this. And the world was really not ready for it. And so I really stopped wanting to tell the world that it was really a great thing and just wanting to build things with people. And that's kind of how our business really took off. Is we just said, we're going to build software this way and co-develop with companies that are willing to do it that way, and we'll train them how to do it. And then we'll see what happens. And what happened is that there was an unmet need there, building software better, and it really took off and grew. And one of the things that came out of that was Pivotal Tracker, which I assume is the product that you're using, which is kind of an embodiment in software of how we think about things. So.
Okay. Nabu?
So as a CEO, I know a lot of people in this room are working on industry disruptive technologies. And one of the things that, in hindsight, looking back at it, I was focused on the technology and making sure it worked. And actually, what really was a bigger problem was the psychology of the incumbents. So anytime you do something that is disruptive and requires some buy-in, either from customers that are not as fast moving, or your today's competitor, tomorrow they're your partner, did you guys develop or put any resources specifically into addressing the resistance for the incumbents, or the psychology of that piece of it? Example, Uber, you've got taxi driver unions working against them. Was there any forethought in your development of a product or of a marketing pitch to address that sort of resistance for the market?
Interesting.
And sorry, is the question how our companies think about disrupting existing players, or how we think about preventing disruption ourselves?
I think it's more about preventing the incumbents from preventing your success as a disruptive technology.
I see.
Even if it's an obvious next step, the people that own the current market, the buggy whip manufacturers don't want the
Yep.
cars to take over, and they will do some things that are, in some cases,
Yep.
hard to predict. The taxi unions trying to shut down Uber in different cities and whatnot. Did you guys put resources or
Yeah, great question.
responsibility into that sort of space?
If you put yourself in the mindset of the disrupted companies, I think there are two interesting things that stand out. One is, and a lot of people miss this as a central tenet of disruption theory and Clay Christensen's writing and stuff like this, is that the scary thing about disruptive innovation from the point of view of the incumbent is that your actions locally are not always irrational. It's not that these large companies don't necessarily see the threat coming. It's the fact that every action they took, every step of the way, was rational. It just added up to a really problematic trend, in the long term. And so a concrete example of this is Kodak, making lots of money off film sales, and then you have the arrival of the digital camera, and that's just going to mean lots less film gets bought, and they make less money in the film business. And so Kodak, they could launch a digital camera, but they don't want the digital camera to succeed because they're making lots of money off the film business. And so there's the emergence of these disruptive new digital camera entrants, and Kodak's a little bit stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so that's one on disruption, is that it's not that they're acting totally irrationally, it's that they're acting rationally, but that's actually a scary place for the incumbent to be. The second thing is that a lot of disruption comes from the fact that there is a skills gap between the disrupted and the new disruptor. And so in your Uber versus the taxi companies example, part of the problem was that, one, there was some complacency and things like that, certainly, but also Uber is a mobile app and a mobile technology platform, and these taxi companies, there was no way they were in the position to be able to launch something like that. They just didn't have the skills. And so all that gets to, if you are a new company and looking at disrupting an incumbent, I think you can take advantage of both of those facts, that there's a little bit of guerrilla warfare going on here. There's some asymmetry in the relationship. And so, you're a smaller, much less established player, you're more agile, you may have skills that they simply do not have, and you may want to move the contest into an area where you are better positioned to compete. Mm-hmm. One of the things I've been sort of impressed with Tesla is you can just see that they're trying to make the car contest about software, and they have the big 15-inch screen on the Model S, and the new car they just launched that has the gull-wing doors, and they stop if you park it in a garage so that they don't hit off the garage. And so now you have all these other car manufacturers who have to develop these software teams, because apparently they were building cars, and now it's a software contest. I think you can very tactically use the advantages you have as a disruptor when you're competing against a larger company. Now, they have some advantages that you don't have. They have a large brand, they're well established, they have deep pockets, things like this. And so how these markets end up playing out, again, you have an availability bias here. We're talking to companies that weren't snuffed out by incumbents in the early stages, and there are probably, the ghosts of a couple of companies that could be on the panel with us who instead did not make it. And so you have the forces favoring the disruptors on the one hand, the fact that you might have new skills that are relevant in the market, the fact that you can afford to bring a lower cost solution to market, whereas the incumbent wants the higher cost solution to succeed. Those are the forces in your favor. And then you have the forces in their favor, like their established brand, their established sales force, things like that. And who wins depends on the particular relevance of those in the market. And is that, software skills more important, or will the existing brand win? And the exciting thing about, being here and witnessing all this disruption is we can't know in advance. And so you're watching all these battles play out, and it's actually unclear which way the scales are going to tip.
So did you partner with your enemies?
No, they're enemies.
Did you? I think that's really the question, right? Just think about the industry you're disrupting, right? So did you go partner with, do you take on the legal?
FedEx, for example.
Kinko's, right?
They're an investor. They're a great customer. Xerox, right? Absolutely. Because our real enemy is paper. Now, the beautiful thing about paper is it doesn't punch back. It's been done the same way for 3,000 years. And so I think one of the keys is, because we have an interesting perspective. We DocuSign enable, we fuel probably about 98% of the disruptors, but our big business is the Fortune 500, where we're DocuSign enable them. We're their first step in their digital transformation, because before they can get to artificial intelligence, big data, payments, all this stuff, they got to get the paper out. And the other thing is, it's a cultural thing. In terms of how do you get some quick wins? So, for example, the CEO of Deutsche Telekom, he says, before you can steer the ship, it has to be moving. He actually used a Mercedes, but anyway, okay? And he goes, DocuSign gives us quick wins. That gets us moving. So that cultural transformation is key. But the magic is if you can affect your customer's business model. So because these disruptors, that's what they're attacking. They're attacking the incumbents, the big guys' business model. So if you can, when we work with Mike Corbett, CEO of Citicorp, it's like we're helping those guys change their business models. Because you just look on their website, there's 200 companies that are attacking. Just their little pull down, it's unbelievable.
So you partnered, did you partner with your enemies?
Yeah. We invite our competition to come in and pair program with us.
Yeah.
It's kind of an expanding the pie thing and creating a community.
It's really hard these days to figure out who's your friend and who's not, right? As technology has kind of converged all of these different, worlds and
I think it depends which market you're in, what your product's like, or what your service is like. But I definitely think there are opportunities to collaborate with your competitors that are very beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always say we have no competitors because we work with every accelerator organization, everybody out there, to figure out how to solve the problem faster.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more quick question, because then we're going to be up with time. Okay, in the back.
Right. Excuse me. This. Sorry to
Oh,
interrupt.
you're not the
It's
question
the
answer.
voice of the goddess. Sorry. We have time for just this last question, and then we encourage all of you to go see all the other wonderful sessions that are taking place throughout the afternoon and tomorrow. So,
I'm sorry, we actually had someone here earlier. I'm over here.
Okay.
She had raised her hand first.
Oh, I was told.
All right. In
Two
the back.
quick ones,
It's gonna be
please.
really quick, but probably you can ask later and you can answer both questions really fast. I am Leti Gasca. I am co-founder of the Failure Institute. We are a research center that studies entrepreneurial failure in different countries and industries. And we have realized that a big challenge of entrepreneurs, specifically in the growth stage, is that they have a lot of fights within the co-founders. What would you recommend to prevent this cause of failure that is so common in the growth stage? Thank you.
I personally hope to never make it to your institute. I'm sorry. So I'm in a little bit of a different situation than most people in that my co-founder at Stripe was my brother, and so we've been. I guess, having our small failures and resolving disagreements.
So your parents would be really, really mad at you, right, if you guys just decided
Exactly,
to part ways.
yeah. Somewhat awkward Christmas dinners. But I think that is one thing that people genuinely underweight, is that, yeah, if you look at the statistics, huge numbers of companies, the co-founding teams break apart. I mean, sometimes you have these husband and wife teams where they get divorced. You know, it's a really stressful thing to go through. And you can't know for sure, but one thing that can be very useful is getting some practice working with that person having worked with them at a previous company, having started a previous venture with them, having just been employees at the same company, actually having practiced working with someone and seeing what they're like under stress, seeing what they're like in conflict, seeing what they're like in all these situations that you will go through. People really underestimate that for some reason.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, one final question in the back.
Okay, one final question. Malachi Leopold from Trep Life. The question is, do you believe that in preparing for growth, that the growth of a company will be limited by your own personal growth? So meaning, in order to be a high-growth company, do you also need to be a high-growth person investing in your own personal development?
Absolutely.
No, I think no question about it. I mean, if you're the founder, if you're the leader, if you're the CEO, you set that pace. But the key thing is, how do you get leverage? And it's all about having a great team. Mm-hmm. And the thing to always remember is that your ego is your enemy. Humility is your friend. And that's a little magic sauce that a lot of people, I think, forget.
Great answer. Great answer. Okay, well, thank you very much, Carolyn, Rob, Keith, John. Give it up for our great panelists. Thank you.